Good morning from surviving the 80s, my 80s. And the morning is getting away, but I've got to take a break. And I thought I'd just read a little story. And it's from my book that I wrote for my family about my childhood. And for those of you that haven't heard any of these stories, they take place in the late 40s, early 50s, and my folks had a home. It wasn't an assisted living home because that hadn't come about yet. But it was a home for mainly men. We had women too, some. But they were placed in our home from the state. We had a state license to take care of so many. And also at that time, the term Alzheimer's was, we didn't hear that. Although looking back, I know that we had some that had that, but for the most part, they didn't. They just were men that needed a home. Okay, and the state sort of had case histories on them and knew about them. So, I'm going to start. Swede was a lonely man, only entering occasionally into conversation with the other men. He was one that had carried the label loner much of his life. Little was known about him. He appeared to be nice, even handsome, quite intelligent, but quiet and reserved, with a sad air about him. He was what they would call a dark Swede. He had steel gray hair and a darker complexion than the typical blonde Swede. It was his accent, however, that gave him away. He still had trouble mixing his V's and W's. The sitting room would have been the formal dining room of our old Queen Anne style home if it hadn't been needed as a place for men together. There were plates on the plate rail and wallpaper border, and even a large polished oak dining table with a seasonal display on its center. The table held the evening newspapers. The main attraction of the room, though, was the collection of chairs. Straight, severe hardwood chairs, padded rocking chairs, upholstered chairs, small chairs, large chairs. None matched, none were new, and each became attached to some man. One of the strangest chairs had a back and sides all the same height and all upholstered. The seat was so soft that you sank down in it, making it impossible to see over the sides. Around the top, at each corner, and at the ends of what should have been the arms of the chair were large square wooden knobs. I imagined that when one got tired of using it for a chair, one could turn it over and use it for a doghouse or even a playhouse. When I told my mother this, she said, "Don't be silly. It was made back in the Midwest where it gets very cold in the wintertime, and it was to keep the draft off their necks." Oh, it sure is ugly, though. What did they use it for in the summertime, then? A doghouse? She didn't answer. During preparation time, meal preparation time, the door between the sitting room and the kitchen was always closed. This gave my mother more privacy while fixing the dinner and allowed each side to have their own pre-meal conversations. It was time for the men to catch up on each other's interests, read the newspaper. In the kitchen, it gave us time to talk about family, school, coming events, or the problems of our day. One October evening in the kitchen, my mother was saying, "Only one more month and you'll be 11, Anne. How will it feel to be 11? "I don't know yet, but I do know what kind of cake I want you to make." "Let me guess, a gingerbread cake?" "Yes, and I want it with orange sauce you make poured all over the top. Oh, I can hardly wait." "A month isn't long. Uh, would you see if the men are in? Okay, yes. I went and checked. All except Swede. Do you want me to go to his room and call? No, he always comes. You can check again in a little while. How about setting the table now? And while I was putting on the plates, I started telling about my school day, but I could tell my mother wasn't really listening. And I went on, but Mary Ann, she interrupted. Check again. See if Swede's there now. I need to call the men in for supper, and it's just in a few minutes. I looked. He's not there. Are all the other men? Yep. Are you sure? Yes. But I'll look again. As I opened the door, she looked over my shoulder. See, they're all there except Swede. She went over and peered out the dark window, and I went to the stove to stir the gravy. I licked the spoon. The gravy's good. What's in the oven? Smells good. She didn't answer, continuing to stare out into the blackness. Turning around, she said, Anne, go upstairs and get your dad. And then back to the window, she began to talk to herself. Strange, he's never late. This isn't like him. I ran up the stairs to get my father, who was fixing a leaky faucet in the upstairs bedroom. Daddy, Mama wants you in the kitchen. Swede hasn't come in for dinner, and I think she's worried about him, being he's always the first one there, even after Walter, I mean. Let's see, I lost my place. Okay, I just need to dry my hands and put these tools together, he said as he wiped his hands on the faded green towel. Then he gathered up his tools and placed them in the box. All right, let's go down. In the kitchen, he was telling my mother, he's probably in his room and just lost track of the time. It's getting dark a lot earlier now. I'll go out and call him. Should I call the others in? It's all cooked and it'll get cold. Go ahead, it'll be a good lesson for them to see what happens when they're late. My dad stepped out on the porch and lit his carbide miner's hard hat. It began hissing and casting a bluish-white glow. Can I go out with you? I asked, and he held out his hand for me to take. Sure. His room was empty. My dad stood there regarding the vacant dark room. Well, let's go to the barn. Maybe he's working on something. By now, my eyes had been accustomed to the night, so I ran on ahead, skipping up the ramp into our large barn ahead of my father. I hurried across the feed room, stepped down onto the platform leading into the horse stalls. I stood alone. I could hear my father coming up behind me. I turned. Never in all my wildest thoughts had I been prepared for the sight. Caught in the circle of the hissing light, just 10 feet away stood Swede, staring at me with blank, vacant, expressionless face. A horror of horrors came over me, starting with a tingling to my scalp, continuing down my spine, and hitting the pit of my stomach, causing me to gasp. Swede was not standing, he was hanging. I ran, I turned and ran. A piercing, screaming noise tore at the night air, and I ran faster. The sinister-looking vines were twisting and grabbing at me as I was trying to race under the grape harbor up the path to the safety of the house, the wailing noise following me. Then I could hear my father's running steps behind me. He was yelling, "Stop, stop, Mary Ann, stop." He caught me, grasping me against his strong, warm body. The screeching noise stopped. I then realized it had been my screams. I started to cry and shiver. I was glad to be safe in my father's arms where nothing could hurt me. He was talking softly to me, saying over and over, "Do you hear me? Do you understand?" "What? You're okay. I know you're frightened, Annie girl, but you must not go into the house screaming. You'll upset everyone. Do you hear me?" "Yes." Good girl. Now listen some more. Swede hung himself. He committed suicide, and you saw him in my light. He looks scary, but he can't hurt you. Do you understand? Sort of. Why did he do that? Hanging himself? How awful. My teeth were chattering so hard it was hard to talk. I don't know, sweetheart, but he must have been terribly unhappy and sick. Now we must go into the house, and I want you to act calm when you walk in, and then go up to your room. I'll have Michael come up and stay with you. He can even bring up your supper. Can you act calm? I'll try, but I can't eat. My tummy feels bad. Yes, I'm sure it does, but act calm. You can do that. I'll hold your hand. Come on. And he drew me close. I'll take you to the stairway. Then I must tell your mother, and she'll call the authorities. Michael will be with you, honey. If I knew that this is the way we would find Swede, I would not have let you come out with me. I'm sorry this happened to you. Daddy, can I tell Michael? Yes, I guess so, but not until you're in your room by yourselves. On the stairway, I started crying. I felt a great relief at being safe in the light. My teeth even stopped chattering, but I felt so weak it was hard to climb the stairs. My legs felt rubbery. Before I got to the top, my brother started coming up behind me. You okay? What happened? Didn't Daddy tell you? No, tell me. I can't till we're in my room with the door shut. Once in the room, I flopped face down on my bed and I cried hard into my pillow. My brother sat down beside me. Are you okay? What happened? Yes, just give me a few minutes and don't keep asking. I'll tell you, only leave me alone a few minutes. I'll go and finish listening to the radio program then. And he started to walk out the door. No, don't leave me. I changed my mind. I don't want to be alone. I need you to be here. But just don't talk for a while. I feel sick. Yeah, you look kind of pale. He moved to the foot of the bed and sat down waiting for me to talk. Swede hung himself, I softly whispered to the pillow. He what? I turned over, looked at my brother, and said louder, but flat, he hung himself in the barn. He hung himself in our barn. Why? Daddy said it was because he was sick and awfully sad. Yeah, I guess he was. I began to feel better. Sitting on the bed, I began to tell my brother about going to Swede's room and then going down to the barn. My mother came up. Honey, are you all right? She sat down on the bed hugging me. Some more tears trickled down my cheeks. I sniffed. Yes, I'm feeling better. What's going to happen now? We call the coroner. He's the man who comes out to make sure how he died. We know how he died. Can't you just tell him? No, he has to make an official report before Swede can be moved. We call the state and they have someone coming on the way, and when they get here, they'll carefully cut him down and take him away. Do the men know yet? No, I'll tell them in the morning. Do you want any supper? No, I don't want to eat. Well, I have to go now. They'll be here soon. Michael, you look after her. I started to tell Michael how eerie Swede looked hanging in the glow of the carbide circle of light. I carried that last vivid picture of Swede captured in my mind for weeks. It tormented me in my dreams and during the day when I was alone. Finally, it faded and escaped into the place where all past happenings go. I thought afterwards, it might have been better for me if I'd been able to go back and see Swede with the lights on, to go back and face my fears and overcome them. The state apologized for the incident. They felt some responsibility because they knew he had made several suicide attempts in the past. Though under the state's supervision and counseling, he seemed recovered from those tendencies of self-destruction and ready for society and home life. He wasn't. So that's the end of that story. And it was really a traumatic happening for me at that young age. Okay, I am going to show you what I'm taking a break from and some of my morning. Okay, I'll show you my table, and I've got more lavender in, but it's my apples that I want to show you. And I went out and picked them off of our Anna apple tree, and there's enough here. I'm going to make an apple pie for Tom. And besides that, there was enough left on the tree that weren't as rosy red as these that I'll leave on and make a second apple pie. Now, I'll show you in the kitchen my tomato haul for this morning. Actually, there was more, but I've made a salsa and used up some of them. But that's what I'll have to be doing in a little bit. And I was gonna mow lawn this morning, but the morning is gone, and I know I probably won't even do it this afternoon. But hopefully tomorrow I'll get to the lawn. In the meantime, it'll just be busy growing in our summer weather. So this is how I survived the 80s, and it's been nice visiting with you. Come again